It's a challenging place to be where your life does look good from the outside, but it feels like something is missing on the inside.
Mm.
It's challenging because you want to convince yourself. I wanted to convince myself that it was all fine.
From the outside, that looks like someone has got everything together. It's very like people would aspire to the things that you're achieving. But what I'm hearing is you still felt like something was missing. And when I'm reading in your book, you're saying that maybe sacrifices are not always necessary. But tell us about that first stage. Tell us about what you tried when you took that demotion, how that felt, and where that took Rusty.
You described it very well, actually, Mick. And on the personal front, it was wonderful because when we think about balance, most people say, "Well, I want more balance in my life," and what that really means is I want more time for myself. And through this, first attempt, I found more time for myself. But what's fascinating, it still didn't feel balanced. And the reason it didn't feel balanced to me is I had plenty of time for myself, but work no longer had that excitement and that energy, and it wasn't as fulfilling to me because I wasn't stretching and growing and doing new things. And so it lost some of that edge. As someone who had been successful in my life up until that point, I had always been the top of my class in school, and I'd always done really well in my performance reviews at work, and I had gotten promotions, and I had been the director of finance, a worldwide director of finance at Apple, and had this huge responsibility, and I was successful, and I felt like that was a big part of my identity and how I saw myself. So in this first phase, part of the lack of balance was losing that part of my identity. I felt like, oh gosh, I was on this track and I got to a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. And so I didn't see myself as successful in the same way. I was doing more of a safe kind of job that you described. And it affected me. And I no longer wanted to talk about work. People would ask me, what do you do? And I would give kind of a short answer, but I would avoid the subject because I didn't feel good about it. So for me, the lesson in that is that the answer is not necessarily an easy job. And, at that point, I thought that it was sacrifice. Sacrifice required one way or the other: sacrifice your family or sacrifice your career. And I chose to sacrifice my career, but I still wasn't happy. And so, this idea of sacrifice, I think, ultimately isn't a rewarding path, because what I really wanted was meaningful work that challenged me, that gave me an opportunity to grow, and time with my family and for myself. I didn't want to have to sacrifice. I didn't want to make a trade-off, but that was all I knew at that point. And so, and maybe I flip-flopped from one side of the scale to the other, where I was overly weighted on career earlier in my life, and then I had flip-flopped to be overly weighted on family. And that didn't feel right either. So it was, that was my first attempt. And I learned that in the process.
Mm-hmm. From the outside, that looks like someone has got everything together. It's very like people would aspire to the things that you're achieving. But what I'm hearing is you still felt like something was missing.
It's a challenging place to be where your life does look good from the outside, but it feels like something is missing on the inside. It's challenging because you want to convince yourself. I wanted to convince myself that it was all fine. And my life should be great. And if I were to talk to somebody else, they would say the same thing. Wow, Rusty, you work at the most valuable company in the world. You've got a great job. Whether it was the director job or the next job I had where I had demoted myself, either one of those was a great job, and it was stable, and I could manage the job well. I was paid well. There was a lot of good things, and a lot of people would say, I would love to have that career. So if you feel that about your own life and still you feel like you want more or there's something missing, that's a challenging place to be, because it feels like, well, am I being greedy? Am I being unreasonable? Am I, what's wrong with me that I've achieved so much of what I wanted to achieve in my life, and yet I still feel like there's a piece missing. And so that place can be a really challenging place to be, because it really calls you into question, like, am I doing something wrong, or is there something wrong with me, or am I being unreasonable here?
Think about it for yourself, but then also think about the way that you perceive other people. So when you see someone outwardly successful, that does not automatically mean that they've achieved fulfillment inside. In fact, in some cases, they may be very unfulfilled, and in some cases even depressed, even though outwardly, you might look at their life on Instagram, or you might look at their career and go, oh my God, that person's got everything they could ever imagine. What's on the outside does not actually necessarily translate to what's on the inside or what's going on for them. So please keep that in mind and we talk a lot about comparison. Don't compare yourself to what you see on Instagram or what you see someone's outwardly successful career. Be very mindful of this.